Ethos. What is it when we talk about ethos? What is ethos? How do we understand ethos and how to use it in our papers? In a series of videos that I'm going to try to make today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through different kinds of ways of doing rhetorical analysis that I hope will be useful for your first paper. First, a quick screen share. I'm going to take you into Wikipedia because that's a good source for things like this. You notice under Ethos, Wikipedia has a rhetoric section right here. And what we see in that section is that ethos is not just one static term. You will remember from Ross Kelly, the emphasis on character and so on, right? Ethos is a more complicated term in that it stretches back to the Greek and Roman days of rhetoric. And I'm sure there's kind of all kinds of different global approaches to ethos that we might throw in here. But the things that I wanted to make clear here are first, that ethos comprises several different ways of helping speakers relate to or align with the values of an audience. Let's go through them first. This first one, called phronesis, is a fascinating way of saying you must have practical wisdom and demonstrate it. Now, what's complicated about that? Well, it sounds a lot like logos, doesn't it? Arete is the virtues that you show or the goodwill that you show. Just in general, right? What are the kinds of, what's the ideology? What's the belief system? What are the morals that you are putting on display when you're making a particular kind of argument? Is it a good argument? And then finally, eunoia, a complicated one that means you're showing goodwill toward the audience. That is, that you want to do well for the audience. This could be because you seek to inform them, to teach them something that they didn't know, or that the policy proposal that you're putting together aligns with their values and could help them downstream from here. So what does this mean? In effect, what we're doing when we're doing a rhetorical analysis focused on phronesis is we're looking for those ways in which people use words that align with these three different kinds or aspects of ethos. That is, we're looking for examples of what we might call phronesis, arete, and eunoia. And in a sense, this Wikipedia article goes on to say, ethos doesn't belong to the speaker, but to the audience. That is, it's the audience that determines whether a speaker is a high or low ethos speaker. Your violations here could include things like the speaker has a direct interest in the outcome of the debate. The speaker has a vested interest or ulterior motive. No, go that way. That would be great if you buy the product that I turn out to have stock in. Or finally, the speaker has no expertise. This is probably the one that we concentrate mostly on in academic environments, is what kinds of expertise do we bring to a particular situation? And how should that influence our decision-making, right? So if we go into an article, let's just say this one, right? This is a Grist article, and it's an interesting one because we see right away it's a sponsored article. This is something that we should probably think through in different ways, because sponsored articles are not straight news articles. They have been, I wouldn't say polluted or corrupted in any particular way, but you see that Grist has a partnership with the Water Solutions Network. And thus this kind of treads a line between news and public service announcement on the one hand, or an ad campaign on the other. How we think of the argument that this place is making might ultimately be the final arbiter here, right? So what we see right here is it's an article about dam removal on the Klamath River, just north of us. And we see in different kinds of ways that the article wants to say straight away that the dam removal is good, but it's also a good example of collaboration, right? So there are two arguments that seem to be made straight away. One is dam removals are good. Second one, it's a good example of collaboration. Now, what do we hear in that? Well, collaboration seems to be a moral or a virtue, right? Rather to collaborate than to co-opt or to manipulate. You know, that seems to be a kind of a virtue. So we get arete right there. It starts off the largest dam removal in United States history is set to take place along the Klamath River by 2023. A lot of people live here. Third paragraph, there's a collaboration going on. Here's a section that all is about the river itself and the people who live along the river. Now, this seems like phronesis, doesn't it? In different kinds of ways, they are exemplifying their knowledge of the issue. That is, their knowledge of the river, their knowledge of salmon, their knowledge of dams, and then finally agriculture, and of course, their understanding of the tribes that have lived along that river for quite some time, for at least 250 years. So what we get toward the end of this section, of course, is not just their knowledge, but a continued, I wouldn't say continued, a beginning emphasis on the argument that they're going to start to make here. An agreement to demolish the dams, ownership issues, the removal plan. And so here they are framing different kinds of ways of solving these problems. That is, how do we remove the dam and how do we do it in a collaborative fashion, right? So in this section, while this might be phronesis, what we get in this section is straight arete. That is, virtues of collaboration being heralded over other forms of working with people, working against people, frankly. Working with people is better than working against people. As a rhetorical analyst, what you would do is you would find singular sentences or phrases where this virtue really comes to the fore and analyze it. As we could do in a section right here, you could ask questions about phronesis and say, well, is this the right material to include? Is this the best material to include? And in terms of practical wisdom, is it practical to put all of this information first in the organization? In this section right here, collaboration, arete, and you also see a little bit of eunoia. That is, we want what's best for the people, the Yurok tribe and the Karuk tribe. So we want to do what's best for them. So we have no ulterior motives here. So one water debate among many seems ideal. That seems like an interesting way to frame this. Local actual stakeholders are not just engineers. They are Native American tribes and nations. Getting stakeholders to the table or on the same page. Okay, so we see the value of collaboration here. And we realize if we got these stakeholders together and actually taught them how to do conflict resolution, okay, so we're not talking about rivers necessarily anymore. We're talking about people. And so arete and eunoia, right? By the end then, this kind of section seems to be all about us and what we should derive from this case. They call it the Klamath test case. Does this offer a model of operations for the future? In this, it seems more like how audiences should react to this article, framing the response that people might have to reading about the tribes and the engineers and the feds and other politicians who are all involved in the dam removal on the Klamath. So what we do then is we are putting all of this in the hopper. We're saying to ourselves, okay, so in terms of ethos then, what are we doing? We followed this article all the way from the beginning to the end, and we've noted certain parts that seem to stand out to us in terms of these three terms, phronesis, arete, and eunoia. But we've also got a situation in which this, as a online news magazine, is a sponsored article. So what kinds of conclusions might we reach as rhetorical scholars about the particular power, persuasiveness, or effectiveness of this particular way of framing the issue? Is it persuasive just on a gut level to you as a reader? Don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not, right? We know that they are using certain kinds of strategies. They are using certain kinds of ethos appeals to make this a palatable argument for us. And the argument had two forms, that is dam removal good, collaboration on dam removal better, right? And then by the end, we're saying, okay, so is this the kind of article we'd like to see more of in terms of debates about dam removal, which is essentially it's fundamentally an environmental rhetoric, environmental issue. So here we put it all together and we reach conclusions about how persuasive we find the ethos appeals to be in this particular case, and infer out from there on, okay, so more articles like this in the future, more sponsored articles on online news magazines, informational articles that also have an argument going on? Do we think that they have been fair and effective in their assessment of the issues? And do we think specifically on the ethos appeal that they are showing phronesis, that is practical wisdom in the ways in which they are using information for certain kinds of rhetorical ends? I'd say that they're showing certain kinds of moral virtues, like the value of collaboration over other kinds of like punitive or non-collaborative ways of operating. And then finally, eunoia, that is, here is the article, presenting it to an audience. I am doing something I hope that is good for all of us. The author is in effect saying, we think this partnership is good just generally, and we want people to know about it. And thus we are trying to align ourselves and our values with an audience that could say, well, okay, collaboration maybe on the Big Chico Creek or Little Chico Creek or Deer Creek or other places near here. So think this through. Ethos is not just about looking at the author or authors and saying, well, they must be smart because they have a PhD. PhDs like me, we lie every day. I'm serious. There is no, and I could say something really smart about things in my field and really dumb about things in somebody else's field. I only have expertise in my own, right? Otherwise, I'm just a regular person, you know, and I don't claim any expertise in anything about anything outside of my particular kind of very small area of the universe where I have an advanced degree. So a PhD doesn't guarantee that they are trustworthy, and a PhD doesn't guarantee that they have framed the article well. A PhD doesn't guarantee that they are aligning their values with their readership, right? We look beyond things like those kinds of advanced skills or certification processes, because those are inartistic. You either got one or you don't, right? And you put it on display or you don't. But rhetoric is about the artistic use of language in order to persuade. So I'll stop there. This was just an easy way of walking you through how you might start to use ethos. And I'll make a couple of others, maybe on framing, maybe looking for definitions to help us through this next stage of our paper writing.